wanted that inscription to be in there. And so it says, in honor of Eliza Wright, the years of whose unceasing labor was the natural foundation of the Metropolitan Park System, and whose aim was that the Middlesex Fells should be forever preserved as a people's forest park. So now that plaque is up there, and there is Ted standing next to it. And I think that the words that his daughter wrote and wanted to be on there really kind of talk about what our mission is in terms of understanding the place of the Middlesex Fells in history as a unique wild resource protected over 100 years ago by people who realized that it would serve us well. And that's where we come along, because we realize that it serves us well, our children well, and hopefully our grandchildren well. And so our mission is to help people appreciate, enjoy, and protect a spectacular wild place of great significance. And so we've talked a little bit so far tonight about some of those people who have contributed to that appreciation and understanding of this resource. And I just specifically wanted to mention, I don't know if Terry's been mentioned before, but Terry really has stepped forward to take the Babes of the Woods program and put it on a very firm foundation. You know, it's really exciting to go out with him and see the strollers, the moms, the kids. You know, that's the next generation. And Mike Doucette is here too. Mike does hike leadership. Mike, raise your hand. He's been doing hike leadership for a long time. And there is also that bedrock of appreciation for the Fells. It's well known that we distribute our maps, we do trail restoration programs, trail signage. We've mentioned the Beaver Dam project, the Eagle Scout coordination. So there's a lot of things that we do to try to keep this Fells appreciated, well loved, and well protected. And speaking of the latter, in 1892, Malden's Sylvester Baxter, this was after Eliza Wright had departed, and Charles Elliott, the famous landscape architect, they were very worried that there was not enough time really to save precious landscapes like the Middlesex Fells. And Charles Elliott, whose father was the president of Harvard University, Charles hand-scrawled a note on a bill that was submitted to the legislature, and I'm going to read. His intention was that the seashores, the riverbanks, the mountaintops, and almost all the finest parts of the natural scenery of Massachusetts are possessed by private persons whose private interests often dictate the destruction of said scenery or the exclusion of the public from the enjoyment thereof. But by the time Elliott died in 1897, the Fells had become one of the cornerstones of the Metropolitan Park System, and had by that time acquired throughout the Commonwealth greater metropolitan Boston 7,000 acres of parkland. Now, I didn't realize this, how would I, but at the Paris exhibition of 1900, the Metropolitan Park System was featured among the special exhibits. When H.G. Wells came to Boston in 1906, he wanted to see the Metropolitan Park System. They took him on a tour of the parkways, and he wrote of the great reservations of woodland and hills that he saw. I imagine in my mind H.G. Wells driving along the parkway and seeing the Middlesex Fells. One of the early supporters of our efforts to prevent the Fells from being inundated by overdevelopment is a man named Bruce McQuirk. He is a champion of park preservation, and he wrote in a speech, he said in a speech once, the Metropolitan Park System was purchased with And it was written by our attorney, and usually, that all of that is very dense and thick, but not this. And so, if you can circulate this call, we will be sending this out via emails and letters. And I think we can count on you all again. And as I'm going to mention in a moment, it just might be needed. The issue is this. Our intention has always been that the developer continue the environmental review process. The developer, not wanting to play by the rules, is trying to get rid of the environmental review process. So the decision that we will learn on the 5th of June, will be whether or not we have been able to convince the Environmental Affairs Secretary that there will be a price to pay if that environmental review process is not continued. And that's what the letters to the governor comes in. He wants to get reelected. This is a watershed issue. So we'll know in a few days how this is going to work out. If environmental review does not continue, then there will probably be a citizen's lawsuit. And I learned this week that the Sierra Club would probably join with us in that endeavor, saying that environmental harm is imminent. So hopefully we won't go there. Hopefully the developer will have to file a final environmental impact report showing that whatever scale of project will fit within, in a harmonious way, with the Middlesex Fells Reservation. So stay tuned. Now, when Charles Elliott referred in his note to the legislature to the need to save the finest parts of the natural scenery of Massachusetts, I have no doubt he was including in that the quiet nooks and crannies found in places like the Fells. In fact, Eliza Wright's daughter wrote herself, after Eliza Wright's passing, she referred to what it was that the visionaries were looking to do and accomplish. And one of the things she said, I really love, she said, we wanted dark, crowded places, even jungles, that we might press through them and come out upon wild pictures which we had never dreamed were there. Thankfully, these quiet places still abound in the Fells, and tonight we're so lucky to have with us a person who is an expert on what might be found in the most special of those places. I'm talking, of course, about the Vernal Pools and about our special guest, Matt Byrne, co-founder of the Vernal Pool Association. Matt Byrne was introduced to us by Peter Daniel, a member of is it the Herpetology Society? Yes. Matt is like all people who come near us, they pull in even closer. He's now leading a Fells Spring Vernal Pool Congress visits, I should say, and a Fells Spring Vernal Pool hike. So we've got him already on the job. He is the conservation director for the Walden Woods Project, a nonprofit organization in Lincoln, Mass. He is also the co-founder and vice president of the Vernal Pool Association, which began in 1990 as an environmental outreach project at Reading Memorial High School. Is that right?
Correct.
Yeah. I know that because I read it on your website.
Yeah. Fine place.
The Vernal Pool Association is now an independent group of individuals attempting to educate others about vernal pool ecology, the local environment, biodiversity, and the protection of our resources. As I said, I visited the website, and they've got, well, I was wearing one of their t-shirts. Very nice.
And I don't usually wear t-shirts, things like this, but it's a shameless plug. The opportunity to buy is there, so hit the web.
That's right.
We've got a lot of different critters.
There's notes there on the Massachusetts Wetlands Protection Act. Matt has worked for the Natural Heritage Program for 10 years in environmental review, and as a vernal pool ecologist, he received his master's degree from UMass Amherst, having studied vernal pools. Welcome.
Thanks. All right, I think we've hit the right balance between being able to keep you awake and being able to see the screen. salamanders and frogs. And I said, oh, okay. Bonding was great, but they were more fun. I went to the National Heritage Program as a volunteer. It didn't take long for them to figure out that I had, a couple of things to offer. I stayed there for 10 years. Doing all sorts of outreach and vernal pool education, environmental review around vernal pools and their stations. Another shameless plug, sorry, I just have to do it. While there, wrote a field guide to the animals of vernal pools, and I'd be happy to let one go for $10 at the end. So anyway, we'll talk about vernal pools, if the clicker works. I've been living in Malden for several years, since '01 or thereabouts. And I guess before then I was aware of the fells, but didn't know it, and have come over that, of course, these years to know it and really love it. Awful lot of vernal pools, and I'm sorry to say that I haven't really spent enough time playing. I don't really know what we've got there. So that leads into that's foreshadowing for the end of the talk. So what are vernal pools? Simply put, vernal pools are small ponds, typically set into forested situations. They most often fill around our neck of the woods, fill in the fall. They'll hold water through the winter and freeze over in these nice little skating ponds that you can find out in the woods. By early spring, they really come to life. They are at their fullest. The water is at the maximum height, typically, in the early spring. And the wildlife that make vernal pools really unique and special just explodes in that early part of the spring. I'll get into the life history of some of those critters. Not all, but many, dry out completely in the late summer, early fall. And what does this do? It means that you have an aquatic ecosystem, albeit small, that is free of fish. And the lack of fish is critical to the development of a host of organisms. The existence of this kind of habitat, these aquatic systems that dry out and are free of fish, have led to the evolutionary development of entire ecosystems that are dependent on that type of system. So we have our the bald eagle of vernal pools, the spotted salamander. Scientists can be pretty creative at times, but other times they're not so much. Spotted. It is spotted. What do you know? This is among a group of salamanders that are known as mold salamanders. They are fossorial, they live underground. So while the spotted salamander is actually a very common organism on our landscape, most people go through life never having seen one and being thoroughly amazed by this 7 or 8 inch salamander that has this perpetual smile on its face and have black and rubbery and they're cute and they're just really cool as far as I'm concerned. As I say, they are part of a group of salamanders called mole salamanders. They're a genus Abyssma. Spotted salamander, very close relative to blue spotted salamander. Again, some creativity shown in naming of this critter. Jefferson salamander, the blue spotted Jefferson, are very closely related. Both of these species are on the state list of rare organisms that are especially concerned animals, because they're fairly uncommon. At least we think they are. And then the last cousin in the mole salamander family is the marbled salamander. Now, what's interesting, one of the things that I'm convinced that marbled salamanders ought to be in the Middlesex Fells. And so I'll give some prize. I don't know what it is. I don't know what it's worth. But if anybody finds marbled salamanders, I think that's worth something. They ought to be here. There's no reason that they're not, but they are a very rare species. The state threatened organism. Used to have, there are 1970s, they were in Wakefield and Boxford. They haven't been seen in 30 years in the Sandy Woods. So, but the Fells is a great reservation, obviously, a great reservation, ought to be here. So I think there's opportunity there. The wood frog of the woods. Beautiful frog, about 2 inches long, this dark mask, this robber's mask, distinguishes it from all of our other frogs. All of these organisms, the mole salamanders, the wood frog, and the fairy shrimp, are what we call vernal pool obligate species. They are dependent entirely on this ecosystem and do not successfully reproduce without vernal pools. One great thing about macro photography is you get to see stuff up close really well, but you don't get a sense of scale. So I like to point out that these fairy shrimp are not. They're about an inch long in full size. Really beautiful animals. And I found them in several places in the Fells. They've got a very interesting biology. They, when the pools flood, the eggs hatch, and the animals grow from teeny to teeny-ish. They last for a couple of months. They get to about early May or so and start disappearing because the temperature of the pools gets to a point where it starts killing them off. And the females, they do their thing. They reproduce. And the female drops encysted eggs onto the, as she's swimming around, she leaves these eggs around. The pool dries out, and that drying and potentially freezing during the wintertime triggers hatching. The next time the water comes back, suddenly you have these magically appearing fairy shrimp. And they are actually so dependent on this annual or periodic drying that you do not find fairy shrimp in habitats that don't exhibit this high degree. Very cool. So, something about the life history of spotted salamanders. They make a trade-off. They decide, so to speak, that using aquatic habitat that's free of fish is pretty important. In fact, so important that if they breed where there are fish, they don't make it. And so they're using habitats that dry out. And in order to sort of increase the chance that they're actually going to make it through the larval development, they try to get going as early as they possibly can. And what that means is quite often in the very early spring, they get rolling. And depending on the weather of the year and so forth, quite often you find them crossing patches of ice and going down to a pool that just has a foot-wide moat of open water. And they'll slither into that, and they'll do their thing. But they want to get rolling as soon as they possibly can in the early spring. Now, these are terrestrial organisms. They breed in the vernal pool, but they live in the uplands surrounding the pools. And because we've done such a good job of sort of laying tracks all over our world, one of the best ways to encounter salamanders is to go out on early spring nights when it's 40 degrees and raining after dark and look on the roads. And that's one of the best ways to find salamanders because they're crossing roads, which doesn't work out too well for a lot of them, but it is a good way for us to find them. A lot of places have sort of recognized the impact that we have on salamander populations and actually close roads. This is one thing. There are a number of places around the Commonwealth that close roads when you get an amphibian migration night. There are a couple places where they've installed tunnels under the road, and those work for very degree. But anyway, there's a real recognition that roads have an impact on salamanders and frogs, and a lot of places are trying to come up with ways to deal with that. So what are they doing? They're hiking down to their vernal pool, where they were born, and beginning what is known as a salamander congress. It is just the spotted salamanders that do this, again, very early in the spring. And in a place where you have a lot of salamanders, they're all there at once. There's more or less, there's this big night that happens where the vast majority of a population come to the pool on a single night in the early spring. And it can be quite dramatic. In fact, one of the best congresses I've ever seen is down in the pools on the Spot Pond Brook, where I've seen hundreds of these animals all together on a single night. And it's really amazing. It's something to see. It's difficult because it happens 1, 2, 3 nights out of a year. It's typically late at night, certainly after dark. You've got to have lights and be ready to get wet and all that good stuff. But it's awfully good things. It's really rewarding to see it. So, females come down after the males have done the conversing. I should point out, these white packets all over the bottom of this pool are little packets of sperm that the males lay down on the face of the pool, also metaphors. And that's really sort of what the males are there to do, is to put down some metaphors. Females come into the pool typically a little bit later than the males. Males will try to guide a female to his spermatophore. She walks over the spermatophore, picks it up in her cloaca, which is kind of the common vent for the animal. And so we get internal fertilization of the salamander without any real physical contact, which is an interesting approach. But effective. And a couple days later, the female will drop an egg mass. Not so much drop, but she kind of work. But exudes an egg mass, attaches it to a stick that's a couple inches below the surface of the water, so that it's sort of at the right spot where, as the pool dries down, it won't get beached, but it's close enough to the surface that it gets sunlight and warms up and all that good stuff. You'll see some differences here. This opaque white mass, there's about 100 to 200 eggs in a given mass, or these clear masses. They're fist-sized or so, a little bit bigger. And completely viable. There's no difference in viability between these different egg masses. They're just it's a genetic difference. There's a protein in the gelatin matrix that is either there or not there. And it may have some significance to ultraviolet radiation. We're not really sure why they do it, but it just is. So a couple days, the female puts out this egg mass. It sits in the water for 6 weeks or so, depending on kind of conditions in the water. As it grows, as the embryos grow, symbiotic alga develops within the matrix of the egg mass and provides the embryos a little bit of oxygen, consumes some nitrogenous waste. It's a nice system. The eggs hatch out. These are all 3 masses that have all completely hatched out. And the egg mass remains in the pool for a week or 2 before it kind of disintegrates. The larvae hatch out and they spend 2 months or so, again depending on the conditions in the pool, just growing and feeding. They're voracious predators. They eat just about anything they can get into their mouths. They have a very characteristic look. You can't really, if you get one in a net, you can't really confuse it with anything. There's 4 legs, very quickly, big brushy gills on either side of the head, a big wide head. Hard to mistake them for just about anything else. Then after, again, depending on the pool, a total of 3 months or so, 3-4 months, they absorb the gills. The tail becomes more like an adult salamander tail. The spot pattern starts to gel, and they turn into a metamorph that goes off and hikes up into the woods. And that's the complete life cycle of a spotted salamander. This was a really, unfortunately, missed great shot. This spring, I was out at Spot Pond Brook, and it was the middle of the night, and I was walking along, and I decided, I ought to look at the base of the trees. I see some salamanders hiking down. And don't you know, right in this little small mammal burrow, a little salamander nose is peeking out. And I cut the light on, and boom, right back in. just to have, because what they do, I said they live underground in fossorial. They live in the burrows of small mammals, shrews, mice, voles, that sort of thing. They don't really do their own digging. And they seem to live in concert with those guys. They don't kick them out, they don't fight, they get along just fine. But that's where they live. So in here, so this is the base of a beech tree and moss and covered with leaves and so forth, and just all these little holes in the ground. And you find them throughout the forest if you've got a healthy, healthy small mammal population. And in those burrows are where the salamanders live. So, just aerial photograph of a vernal pool and houses, roads, blah, blah, blah. This typical spotted salamander lives 390 feet away from the vernal pool, which is a lot for a 6-inch salamander. That's a long height. It's pretty impressive. What it points out are several things. The conservation challenge for protecting vernal pool ecosystems when we are trying to preserve the ecological function, because we do pretty good at protecting the pool in Massachusetts. This is an 11-acre circle. Can you imagine, telling a developer, well, you got a vernal pool and you can't touch anything in 11 acres. Yeah, right. Not going to happen. So it provides us a real significant challenge. Like I said, we do pretty good protecting the pool, but protecting the upland, the surrounding upland non-breeding habitat is quite difficult. But what this also means is that the energy, the ecological function of the vernal pool is not limited to the pool itself. It's really intricately tied with the surrounding uplands. And it's through predation. Those little frogs, the little salamanders, what are they eating? Well, I'll get into it. But they're eating, essentially, when it comes down to it, they're eating leaf litter. They then go and take that leaf litter, the biomass that they generate by eating, the chain that leads up to the salamander, is then hiked out 300, 400, 600 feet away from the pool and goes into birds and mammals and other things that live in the woods around. So you have this really intricate dynamic between vernal pools and the surrounding forest landscape. It's a very important dynamic to be aware of. Again, very difficult to protect. So the blue spotted salamander, very similar. We probably don't have them around here, but it never hurts to look. I just point out they do have a distinctive egg mass, and with a little practice, you can sort of look at the embryos and look at the membranes around it and tell. Feel it this way, that way. You can tell the difference with a little practice. It's in the field guide. Spotted salamander, blue spotted masses flanking on either side. And blue spots, again, are rare, so it's always great to document them. And there's much better protection for rare species than for this run-of-the-mill vernal pool. Again, the dynamic of this race against drying out. Marble salamanders have come up with another approach. If you're going to use a pool that dries out, then you're going to be racing against drying. Why don't you get there before it fills up? Lay your eggs in the dry pool, hang around until the water comes, defending the eggs from predators. I always like to put that question to the kids and say, what kind of predators do you think they're defending their eggs against? They think raccoons and foxes and salamanders aren't fending off the foxes. They're eating ants and other little animals that come to eat the eggs. They can defend against those. So get down to the pool before it fills up, lay your eggs. By the time spring rolls around, your larva has been hanging out all winter long, eating what it can, and by the time the spotted salamanders are laying their eggs, your larvae are big and really good at eating stuff. And so that's a good way to sort of one-up this game of ways to describe it. So, our other obligate amphibian is the wood frog. They come down to the pools at the very same time as spotted salamanders. They do their breeding activity. You can hear them calling throughout the woods for a week or two in the early spring. Wood frogs, they're the smartest frogs in the world. I don't know if there are smart frogs, but a male wood frog has one thing on his mind. He's got 1, maybe 2 years that he's going to be able to breed. And so, they're going to get them gametes out. And so a wood frog thinks if it moves, it's probably a female frog, so I'm going to get it. And they don't really discern too much. So if it's a green frog, the problem comes in the fact that, another male wood frog has learned how to say, hey, I'm not that kind of frog, in wood frog language. Green frogs don't know how to speak wood frog, so that male grabs on, and, he doesn't hear the release call from another male wood frog, so he says, okay, I must win, and waits. And sometimes they can wait a long time. But anyway, this can go on with other frogs, salamanders, cat-tailed rushes, all sorts of fun stuff. And it can go a little bit tough on female wood frogs. And so we have a female here who is, they're a little bit, a little crazy at the moment. And so, in one respect, this is not going to end well for this female. Pretty much can guarantee when this happens, it's not going to go well for her. But remember, she lives a year or two. And so from the point of view of an evolutionary success, it works. Because she's going to rupture, the eggs will spill out, and they'll get fertilized. And so her egg mass is getting fertilized, and they will hatch and be happy and go off and do probably, so it's not always, we look at it and say, ooh, but it actually, from an evolutionary biological point of view, it works. Wood frogs lay their eggs communally. They find kind of the best spot in the pool, and they put them all there. They hatch out after about 2 to 3 weeks of growing in the pool. Again, same symbiotic alga grows. Little baby tadpoles hatch out. They nibble that algae for a couple of days until they get their legs about them. Actually, they don't get those legs just yet, but until they become a free swimming larva. They grow very characteristic again. At the early part of the season, they're sort of the only fairly large tadpole. Nice brown color and this gold flecking. Gut coil is visible underneath. So very easy to distinguish once you know what you're looking for. By middle summer, they've gotten legs. They're starting to absorb the tail, and they're getting ready to head out. And here's a shot of just an amazing population of wood frogs that are just about ready to leave the pool. And they turn frogs and go off and feed birds and snakes and stuff. So all this, the amphibians aren't just eating other amphibians. As I said, they're essentially eating leaf litter. Vernal pools are detrital systems. They are the foundation of the energy for a vernal pool ecosystem are leaves. But not a lot of things just eat leaves. There's an awful lot of organisms that start by cutting up the leaf litter and turning it into smaller pieces that algae and fungus colonize, and then there are organisms that graze that, and then bigger organisms graze those, and so on ad infinitum until you get salamanders that are ready to leave the pool. This is where the whole invertebrate world is where there's an amazing diversity and an awful lot of fun to learn about. I'm just going to hit it real quick, but this is a caddisfly larva. It's sort of, as an adult, it's a moth-like animal, an inch or so long, pretty nondescript. But what's really cool is the larvae start out tiny, like they get to be a couple of inches long, And they create this case that they make with a silk like spider silk, and they take vegetation, they cut it up, and they stitch it all together into this case. That helps protect the soft body parts, it gives it some camouflage, and it also allows them to help get some air or oxygen out of the water. When they pupate and turn into an adult, they leave behind the case, which you can see right here. And this is on the floor of a dry pool that is up in the fells on the east side. There's in longer-lived pools and pools that hold water longer, there are a whole host of mollusks, small snails, fingernail clams that are no bigger than a pinky finger. This is a great slide to show the kids to say what diversity of mollusks do we have here. But you can all tell that we have 3 different families of snails and then a whole host of fingernail clams. I'm just pointing that out. I know you see that. When you get into the really little stuff, so here's a snail, which is, again, half an inch long. But it's been spent the winter in a wet pool. It's been totally colonized by these little protozoa. And so it's just packed full of little things that are siphoning the water and taking littler things out of the water and hitching a ride around on the snail. There's just an awful lot of stuff going on. Little hydra, Nigerian. Way cool. Just all sorts of neat stuff. Yes, Virginia, there are mosquitoes in the vernal pools. What's interesting, though, is that the vernal pools that I have worked in over the years, if they have healthy populations of vernal pool wildlife, they have a pretty small mosquito problem because there's an awful lot of stuff eating the mosquitoes. So this is, I came across this reading a thorough journal. He was reading an account by D.H. Storer in 1839 that says he's described all the salamanders in Massachusetts. And he says all the salamanders feed on insects, which they devour in great numbers, and hence their utility cannot be questioned. Fairly often enough, I get asked, well, how many salamanders do we really eat? How many are we really eat? And the fact of the matter is that where we have healthy populations of these animals, we have no or minimal mosquito problems. Vernal pools are not necessarily a happy place, as you may have started to gather. There's particularly as pool duration, as the flooding lasts longer, as different pools have different hydro periods, and as that water lasts longer, more predators start showing up. And so this is a predaceous diving beetle larva. They're also known as water tigers, and the big ones that get to be up 3 inches long are called toadlanders. Imagine why. This is a spring peeper tadpole, and one of the approaches to avoiding predation for spring peepers is to stay still, so that those sharp-eyed predators don't see them. That's a pretty good strategy, but it starts breaking down once you've been caught. And so this predator is just kind of nibbling away, working through his tail, working on his leg now, and we'll probably finish later. So it's a good strategy until it isn't. Dragonfly larvae, really amazing predators to watch. Again, longer-lived pools tend to have a nice diversity of dragonflies. Wolf spiders start showing up. You can start getting into the dynamics of feeding underwater and feeding on the water's surface and then above the water. There's just a lot of cool biology to get into. Vernal pools in Massachusetts, most of our amphibians and, the frogs and salamanders use vernal pools. That's the spring peeper. American toads, quite common. They're bred about early to mid-April, and they're hatched out now, so tree frogs start calling early May or so. Really beautiful frogs. Sort of all the other frogs show up in vernal pools. Green frogs, bullfrogs, leopard frogs, pickle frogs. These will all use vernal pools. Perfectly happy to do so, but they don't depend on it. They're not entirely reliant on vernal pools. So they're a group of organisms that we call facultative vernal pool species. A really neat salamander called the four-toad. A lot of turtles show up in vernal pools: painted turtles, spotted turtles, wood turtles, Blanding's turtles. Snakes go to vernal pools. They're all going to vernal pools to hydrate, to after hibernation, to feed. Anyway, there's, as I said, there's not a lot of stuff to eat. Birds go to vernal pools. Mammals use vernal pools. All these things, these organisms come to vernal pools. They use them for a variety of needs. And vernal pools are very, very valuable components of the forested ecosystem. So just quickly go through kind of what vernal pools look like. They can be very small. See a person here for scale. They can be larger, and as they get larger, they tend to hold water longer. As they hold water longer, you start seeing different plant communities develop. Long-lived pools can have shrub, blueberry and buttonbush, and all sorts of neat shrubs growing in them and around them. As pools last even longer, they can get some interesting aquatic vegetation growing in them. These are going to have heavy predator loads, lots of invertebrates going on, some of those bigger frogs breeding. So things change as the pool characteristics change. Again, a small one, but out in the, I think this is the Lynn Woods, very rocky, just like the fells here. They can be tucked away in hemlock groves, and winter can come very late. This is a pool up in northwestern Massachusetts, and winter doesn't actually arrive until the beginning of May. Quite often it'll have ice right up until then. They aren't always sort of these classic little basin forested puddles in the woods. Sometimes you get vernal pool function in red maple swamps and things that are a little less obvious. And they're not always natural. But the salamanders don't care. They really don't. Even when there's fishing on occasion. So this is the lower pool at Spot Pond Brook. Obviously has been, so the brook kind of goes through here. And this is the backwater that was created, when the CCC, the 30s, right? Salamanders have found this. Water sticks around for at least 2 months. With relative exceptions, it's free of fish. And when the salamanders try to breed in it, it works. So therefore, as far as they're concerned, it's a vernal pool, and they keep coming back. And this is where I've just seen amazing numbers of salamanders and people on rainy, dark, early spring nights. This year we had 35 folks come out and watch this stuff happen. But like I say, the salamanders don't care if it was man-made. If it works, that's all they care. So, pick some random place in Massachusetts. So 93, Spot Pond, the reservoirs. And, you start wondering, how many vernal pools are there out there? A few. So this is a project I did several years ago using aerial photographs just like this, sort of like this. I looked for things that had a good chance of functioning as vernal pool, just looking at it from the air, and produced a map of the entire state with around 30,000 dots. And so just in looking at the fells, you see there's an awful lot out there. It was just occurring to me today, the amphibian noise in the early spring must have just been outrageous. But anyway, there's an awful lot to do. There's an awful lot to kind of play with out here. Just zooming in real quickly, show you a couple of photographs of some of the pools. So here's Lawrence Woods, which I've never stepped foot into. I can't wait to get out there and get some more. And here's Fellsway West and several pools. So Governor's Ave here and whatever that road is there. That's the parking area there. And so there's vernal pools just kind of everywhere. So that first one on the left there is just kind of this nice little pool. It's got wood frogs in it. Probably has fairy shrimp. I haven't found them. Up the hill a piece is this nice round pool. Loads of fairy shrimp in it most years. Another pool that's kind of weird. Very close. I haven't found anything. I heard a single wood frog calling in there this spring, but I've never found anything else, which kind of presents all these mysteries. We know an awful lot about vernal pools, but there's an awful lot we don't know. So it kind of presents a neat challenge to thinking about what we need to know about vernal pools. So a couple of things that we've been talking about doing is going through the process of registering, looking at all the vernal pools, or as many as you can get to in a particular season, and certifying them with the state, the ones that are working as vernal pools. And so we've actually started conversations with DCR and friends, and we'd like to do that map I showed of all of those vernal pools. It'd be great to get out to them all and see how many of them actually are vernal pools. How many of them have fairy shrimp? How many of them have the state-listed fairy shrimp? There's a lot of neat stuff that can be done. But getting out and documenting them and figuring out what's in them is a great step. And something that's a lot of fun for amateur biologists, doesn't take a lot of skill. It's a good kind of activity to do. So here's a map of what is already certified. So you can see, actually, there's been a lot done, but when you look at this against that potential map, there's an awful lot of work to do. Again, we did have a pretty successful big night event where we had 30-odd people out this year to play. This is actually shot out of Framingham a couple of years ago. Just getting people together in that early spring to go out and see this is great. It really charges people up. Gets them excited. Doing workshops, the Vernal Pool Association, that's one of the things we really like to do, is workshops for teachers. And just getting people out to vernal pools and seeing them and learning about them translates into people caring about them and wanting to do something to protect them. We find that they are a wonderful tool for teaching kids at all ages, kindergarten all the way up through college. I've got Northeastern University professor has been coming out to do vernal pool walks with me for several years, and she'd like to do the Fells this year, so we'll probably go out and do that. But, it's just amazing, sort of the breadth of educational value of vernal pools now. They can be loved to death. Here's the upper pool on Spot Pond Brook that needed a little bit of restoration and trail work and stuff, but I think that problem is offset by just sort of the wonder that people get and the real love of nature that comes of playing in the woods. That's my kids. So, and that's Freddie from 2 years ago. At the upper pool. He was on his way out.
Introduce some fish into the pool? What would,
So, vernal pools, in order to work properly, so to speak, are free of fish. And if it is sometimes people will dump fish in intentionally, unintentionally, whatever the case may be. If it's a vernal pool that dries out on a regular basis, the fish go away. If it's not a vernal pool, what's that?
Will the vernal pool come back the next
Yeah.
season?
Yeah, and if it's an annual thing, if it dries out annually, the vernal pool goes away. The fish go away, and the salamanders might have a bad year that year, present. But it's taken care of by the drying. I know a pool, worked in a pool for years, 20 years, had catfish. Had a few salamanders coming down to it, but the catfish had gotten in there. And then it finally dried out, and the fish were gone, and suddenly the vernal pool organisms sort of spring back, and so you get these long cycle things happening.
So the fish eat
The fish eat the larvae and also the eggs.
Are there any snapping turtles in the vernal pools in the Middlesex Valley?
I haven't found them, but snapping turtles are pretty commonly found there. I did my thesis work in Concord 10 years ago or so, and there was a vernal pool with a snapping turtle, and even bigger. And I'm taking some people out there in mid-June, and I need to go check and see how the pool's doing. So, and isn't that snapper sitting right there, just sunning, and he's just happy as can be. But yeah, so they hang out, they pick a pool and they stay, more or less.
Do they name vernal pools or just classify them?
Some people do name their vernal pools. We had a lot of classrooms will adopt a vernal pool and it becomes their vernal pool. And, they name it. They kind of take ownership of it. Yeah.
Now, the rest, the little burrows where they live,
Yeah.
not on a big night, but the rest of the year, do they come out at night or do they come out when it rains? Or?
They come out at night in the rain to feed. They do little movements, but they live essentially within kind of a 10 square meter home range with whatever burrows are available within them. They'll hide under rocks and stone logs and so forth. But yeah, they'll come out to feed and stuff at night.
What did you call creatures that live in a vernal pool but don't require one?
Facultative.
What?
Facultative. So, facultative. There's probably an etymology.
And are keepers one of them?
Peepers are a facultative species. Yeah, peepers can breed pretty much in any wetland, but they're happy to do it in vernal pools. So therefore, they use them, but they don't rely on them.
Well, any amphibians migrate or
All of
one pool to another pool?
Oh, from one pool to another. Yes, but a small number. So we kind of use a rule of 10. About 10% of a population, young of the year, will strike out and find a new pool. And what that does, it increases genetic diversity and fitness and all that good stuff. But for the majority of animals in a population, they know that the pool that they came out of worked, and therefore they go back to it. And salamanders live 8 to 12 years on average, and so they're going back pretty regularly.
Would lizards be in vernal pools, and also too would hawks be and birds of prey use the vernal pools for food?
Yeah, we don't have lizards in mass, so in other states where you have lizards, yeah, they go down and feed. And then hawks, birds of prey certainly do. We've seen actually a great anecdote of a friend of mine had little radio transmitters on wood frogs. And he's out there, he's doing his survey, and he's got his, he's looking on the ground for this wood frog, and he spends like an hour looking for this stupid wood frog in this kind of 10-foot circle. And finally, he kind of gives up in frustration and points the antenna up in the air. He doesn't get the strong signal. He looks up, there's this barred owl with his radio.
Of what you hear in a vernal pool,
Yeah.
is that all frogs, or do the salamanders make noise, or is it only frogs?
Salamanders make no noise, so it's just frogs that you're hearing. And, invertebrates that may make noise, birds that may make noise, but primarily frogs.
The one or big party. Are there like specific pools where you keep going back every night and like wait for that, or in your research have you just stumbled upon it like that particular night? Like
Both. There are pools, when I want to see a congress, which I want to do every year, I go to the pool that's where I can go. Because once you find it, if it's a decent congress, you might as well go back because there's a pretty good chance it's going to be.
oh, like every night you'll just
Well, it's very specific conditions. It's it's got to be 40, 42 degrees, it's got to be raining, it can't be windy, da-da-da-da. And so you can pretty much dial in, you pretty much can tell when it's coming. And then if you get out there and any night that's kind of like, pretty close, you're apt to see it. And then more often than not, you say, it's 3 a.m. and I'm not getting up, and that'll be when.
What is it about the rain that makes you feel like it's time to move?
So the rain, they only move when it's raining because they dry out very quickly and will die. And that's actually one of the reasons that you can't have even a slight breeze because it'll just dry up. So it's got to be pretty still. It's got to be raining pretty hard. We don't really know the triggers that bring them, that tells them, yep, it's time. But what we figure is, you get some rain that filters into the ground and sort of cues them in that it's getting there. And then they kind of get close to the surface and wait for things to be just right, and then they go. So, it's and find a burrow close to the pool edge and spend the day there and then come back. But more often than not, we're just kind of finding a spot in the pool and hunkering down.
How deep can the pools get?
Pools can get pretty deep. I go to a pool out in Concord that I've never been to the middle of, and it doesn't dry out. That's a pool that's essentially permanent, but it's in a situation that can't get fish. If they got introduced, it would be a problem. But so it's quite deep. It's maybe 8 to 10 feet deep, and that's not terribly uncommon. And then you get some very deep ones that dry out every year. It's very variable.
What's the geographic range of these salamanders?
Spotted salamanders are into southern